Wear into squares, that's an issue.
Yeah.
To look at it.
What?
The tires wear into squares on that vehicle, so
These
it's,
don't, I just put new ones on.
oh no, they all wear into squares, that's how it.
Fuel tanks fall off, that's an issue.
Okay, we'll bring the special council meeting of the Tracy City Council for Monday, July 30th. Do we do the pledge of allegiance like this? Yeah. Well, let's all stand and do the pledge of allegiance then. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anybody want to say a prayer?
Amen.
We have approval of the agenda as it is written.
I make the motion to approve the agenda.
One second. First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anybody from the public that would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda?
What is all on the agenda? Do you have the agenda here?
Oh, there's some right there. Are you okay?
I think I'm okay.
Okay. Hearing none, we will go on. Our first thing on the agenda is rural development application.
So what I have tonight is the letter of conditions and then the budget for phase 3 and kind of how to wrap up everything we've been working on the last few years. So the letter of conditions is quite lengthy. It replaces the previous 2 phases that we've done. So what I'll do is I'll still go through it pretty in depth in case there's been any changes or anything. You need one too?
We can share.
Okay, perfect. So I've got that in the budget. I think it's easier to go through the letter of conditions first and kind of show you how the funding package is playing out. After we go through that, then I can kind of go through how the budget is set up. The first full year that we consider for this project is 2020. So when we're talking about this stuff and the budget and where the revenue should be, we're looking at when that phase 3 is completed. So it gives you guys the next 4 years to, if you need to adjust rates or whatever changes, to get to that point at that time. So, any questions? Otherwise, I'll just kind of get into the letter of conditions and go through with you guys. Sound good? First page, we flip over number 1. Number 1 is talking about the project description. So phase 3 is finishing up all the underground stuff in town. Phase 3 is too large to handle at one time, so we've split it up and we're taking it in portions. We're doing about half of it now, and then about half will be the later phase to wrap up phase 3 and all of the project. So number 2 is kind of talking about the funding package. Flip back on the front page, right on the top kind of shows you the split. So the loan and the grant is from rural development on the top. The loan portion of it is $8,399,000. The rural development grant is $4,458,000, and then we've got a 0 applicant contribution. PFA is the state money coming into it. They're putting $3.4 million in for grant, and then the ineligible work is everything else that is not eligible under our funding package. So that is something that you guys will figure out how you're going to do that, if it's assessments, if it's levies, or whatever. But that $5,051,000 is not part of the funding, it's the ineligible work. So those are the main numbers of it. When you go back to number 2, it kind of splits it out a little bit more. We have...
Stop you for just a
Go ahead.
second for clarification, but the loan has to also be repaid.
Yes, loan has to be
I
repaid.
just wanted to clarify that on TV.
Yep, loan is repayable.
Can you be up by the microphone?
Oh, definitely.
People said they can't hear.
Oh, that's no problem. Is that a little bit better?
We'll find out.
Okay. So, number 2 is where it's breaking down how the funding is actually going to be split. Because this has 3 different utilities in there, there's a portion for water, for sewer, and for storm. So you can see the loan and the grant split under each one of the items, water, sewer, storm, all the way across. Storm money never has any grants. Storm money is always loan dollars. So that's why under the storm, you don't see any grant. It's just loan. And that'll be the same when we wrap up the last part of Phase 3. So for water and sewer, you see the loan and the grant splits there. The one thing that is kind of unique, because of the size of this, we underwrite the whole thing. So we look at the whole complete Phase 3, and then we scale it back to the portion that we're going to do here. And we scale it back, we're keeping the same splits between loans and grants as we scale it back. Well, in order to keep this project as a doable project, we could not put as much grant, we just didn't have enough grant dollars to put in. So the sewer side has a $3 million loan in there. That is almost maxing out all of the loan dollars on the sewer side. So when we do get to the final phase of the sewer, the loan is only like $175,000 or something. It's very minimal because we had to use more loan in this phase of it for the sewer side. Does anybody have any questions on that? When you go down farther, it just shows applicant contribution, PFA, dollars again, and ineligible work. Total project cost for this portion of the phase is $21,308,000.
That's for all of Phase 3.
Nope, that's this first half of Phase 3.
Half.
All of Phase 3 is roughly around $39.5 million, and that's why we had to split it up due to size. Number 3 is the project budget. On here, it's very small and hard to read, so I printed out a larger copy and put it on the back. So this breaks down all the construction costs, the contingencies, all the soft costs, everything for all of the different utilities, and the ineligibles, all the way through, and it's how we come up with those numbers. Our numbers are rounded to even thousands, but this gives you a very good breakdown of it. These are the engineer's estimates of what the project's going to cost. So this is what we base our numbers off of. So everything we go through tonight is based off estimates. It's based off working with your accountant, putting together what your O&M costs are going to be. It's going to be the engineer estimating what the construction costs are. So everything is based off the best estimates that we can come up with. Number 4 is the repayment. This is talking about the loan portion that you were asking about, Pam. The repayment on the loan portion, with rural development, it's set up over a 40-year term on a fixed interest rate. So the repayment is set. You know what the payments are every year for 40 years. The interest rate you locked in at is 2.375. So we got you the lowest interest rate we can offer. We have 3 different interest rates, and it depends on what the project is and what your median household income is. But for you guys, you did qualify for the lowest interest rate we have. Now, if that interest rate would drop when we close this loan in 3 years or whenever we're done, you would get the better of the rate, either this rate, or if it's lower at that time, you'd get the lower, but it will not go higher than what's listed on here, the 2.375. If you read that column, then it breaks down what that means for an annual payment. You're looking at an annual payment of $327,645. You will make one payment on this loan, but then it's split between each individual system. So you can see the water payment is $133,766. The sewer payment is $117,030, and the storm is $76,850. So that's the general repayment terms of the loan. Is there any questions on that part of it? Okay. Number 5 is just talking about security. The way we secure the loans is with the GO bond, just like we did in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the projects. Number 6 talks about electronic payments. It's just saying that when the loan is up and running, all payments will come out automatically out of your account on the day whenever we close the loan. Number 7 is the construction completion time frame. With the federal side, we have a regulation of 5 years. So our goal is to always spend our money within 3 years, but we have up until 5 years. So that's saying once we obligate this money, we want to have it spent within 5 years from this timetable. The other thing I should mention about the obligation, our pooling date with the national office is this Friday, August 3rd. So what that means is each year the national office gives every state a pool of money. Our goal is to use that pool of money for the state of Minnesota. If we do not use up the money by the pooling date, which is this Friday, what happens is the national office takes that money back and then reallocates it out to different states that have used up their money. So the reason we're on kind of a time crunch and why we had to do the special meeting and all of that is because this has to be turned in and approved by this Friday. So right now what's happening is the file is all completed, it's into national office, they have to review it and approve it. So the stuff we're going through tonight is the conditions of the funding package, but it does not say that it is approved or that the funds are here yet. We need to get word back from national office, and at that point, that's when we can move forward and obligate the money and know that we have the money. So, number 8 talks about distribution of agency funds. Just kind of how we're going to be transferring the money into your account. Everything is the same as the first couple phases. Number 9 is talking about reserves. So with this project, when we put together the budget of how the city's going to pay this back, we want to make sure we're accounting for everything that you have. So what we start out with is how much revenue you should generate. From there, we take off what the operating expense is to run the system each year on all the utilities. But then we also take off this number 9, the short-lived assets. What that's doing is it's setting money aside for repairs that we know are going to come up in the next 15 years. So the engineer has estimated all the different repairs that you're going to have on the water system and the sewer system in the next 15 years, and then we allocate so much money a year aside so that when you do need to replace pumps or lift stations or whatever it may be, the money is already set aside for that. So that's what the reserve is, and if you read through it, it tells you how much we have to set aside for each one of the systems. So on the sewer side, we're looking at $4,485 per year. On the water side, it's $19,369 a year, and the storm is $171. What I do with that is when I receive your annual audit each year, I need to be able to show that you guys are actually putting that money aside and that it's on there. So the accountant will make some kind of special line item or somehow restrict the money or something to show that that money is being set aside. Now, that money's your money, so when something needs to be repaired, you just take the money, repair it. But I just need to show that you're each year putting the money in like you're supposed to with that. Number 10 talks about the environmental requirements. Just like the other projects, we need to make sure we're not doing anything that's harmful to the environment. So the engineers have put together an environmental report on what we're going to do for a project, what potentials are out there, and how to make sure we're not harming any of those potential environmental issues. And if you want to read through all of those, you can, but that's what that part's about. Number 11 is a new one. This was not incorporated into your Phase 1 and Phase 2. This is talking about the AIS, or the American Iron and Steel Act. What that's referring to is Mr. Trump put in a new policy that all steel and iron have to be American-made into these kind of projects because there's federal funding. So anything that comes into this project that has iron or steel will be certified that it's made in America. The engineers will work with the city to make sure you're getting the proper certifications and that everything is documented the way it should be. But that's what number 11 goes through, is all of the American Iron Steel Act information.
I got a question on that.
Yep.
Then. Are those numbers, is that figured into your budgeting on this project already? The American Steel versus any imported stuff, that's already in there? So we're
Yep.
looking at those numbers, right? Okay.
Number 12.
Any other tariffs or anything that come up, we can't predict, obviously, but yeah, we did increase it a little bit.
And if anything does come up, it's always, for us, it's based on the obligation date. So if we obligate this by Friday, anything that would come up after the fact usually takes effect when it comes up. So this would be the one that would incorporate into this project. Number 12 is the engineering services. This just lists out how the engineering agreement with the city needs to be put together, and the engineers will start working on that once we know we've got the money obligated for the project. 13 is contract documents, final plans, specifications. Just lists out what kind of documents the engineer needs to use when he puts together all those final plans and specifications and everything. The government has very strict rules on the whole process, and just like this, we use the EJ/CDC documents, so everything is standardized and the same within projects. 14 is legal services. We need a legal service agreement just showing how your agreement is set up with the city attorney. We already have that in the file, so everything's fine there. Property rights. This one talks about the right-of-way maps, the right-of-way easements, the right-of-way certificates, opinion of the council on the right-of-way, and the title work. This section is saying that once we obligate the money, before we can start any construction, we need to make sure we have all the documents to show that the work is in city right away, and we have the easements that we need and all of that. So we start working on this part once we know we've got the money and we're moving forward with the project. So just like the previous phases. 16 talks about system policies, procedures, contracts, and agreements. Letter A is a conflict of interest policy. We have that already in the file from previous ones, so there's nothing additional the city needs to do with that one at this point. B is contracts for other services and lease agreements. I don't know of any, so there's nothing else that we need to put for either B or C. But it's just saying if there is ever any agreements out there, we need to make sure we review those prior to. 17, closing instructions. When it gets to the point where we've got all the right-of-way information, I will send my file down to our national office, to our attorneys. They will review it and send me back closing instructions that just lay out how we get to the closing when it is that time. When we do go to the closing, we will work with the city's attorney, the government's attorney, and the bond counsel, and everyone kind of works together to close it. So we'll be kind of going through that with phase 1 here pretty soon. 18 is interim financing. Just like phase 1 and phase 2, our money is the permanent takeout financing, so you will need to set up construction financing money, just like you did on the first 2 phases, and then we pay it off when we close our loan. 19, construction account. We need to have a separate construction account set up, so anytime money for phase 3 goes in to the city's funds, it goes into a separate construction account, so everything's tracked easier for the accountant. Number 20 is the user information. The user information is important because when we look at how much loan you can pay back, it's all based on affordability. Affordability is based on how many users you have on the system and how much water they use, because that's what tells us how much revenue you should generate. So on our underwriting for this one, we have at least the minimum of 817 residential users and 187 non-residential users, commercial users, that kind of stuff. So all this is based off the last 12 months of a report that the engineer worked with the city to put together that shows how many active accounts, how many people that are out there that should be paying that you can generate revenue from. So that's why that one's important. It just lists out how many users you actually have. 20 is talking about other funds, just saying that we need copies of commitment letters, so we'll have that from the state for their money. We'll need a commitment letter from whatever you guys do for your construction financing. 22 is a proposed operating budget, saying we need to go through an operating budget. That's the other thing we'll go through real quickly tonight, is how it's set up to pay this back. 23 talks about permits. The engineer will work with the city to get all the permits that we need for this kind of project. 24 is a vulnerability assessment or emergency response plan. Those are plans that the city has already put together some years back on phase 1 and phase 2, so I can use those same ones for this project. It just lays out what the policy is if there was emergency in town, or what the procedure would be to go forward. 25 is a bid authorization. Once we get through all the stuff that we need on the legal side and the easements, rural development will give the city a bid authorization letter. That's what allows you to get to the point to put it out for bids and go that route. 26 is requirements prior to starting of construction. So these are items that we'll need before we can start any construction. The engineer works with you guys to put all these together, so I'll just quickly skim through them. Bid tabulation just shows all the different bidders that bid on it and where the cost came back at. Contract review, just as any other part of the project, our engineer on the state level reviews all the contracts. So when you do figure out which contract you're going to go with and the contracts are put together, the engineer will work with you guys on that. We then will review those as well to make sure we don't see any discrepancies in there, and then we sign off on it, and the city attorney also signs off on it. Number 28 is the final right-of-way. Once we've got all the actual plans and specs designed so we know where the project's exactly going to be, then we will get a final right-of-way map, final title work, all of that stuff instead of the preliminary. 29 is insurance and bonding requirements. You can read through all this. It's all the required insurances that we require the city to have. You guys already have them for phase 1 and phase 2, so I don't think there's anything that would change there. Number 30 is initial compliance review. That's something that I'll work with the city on. Our compliance review is, the main purpose of the compliance review is to make sure that there's no discrimination to any potential users on the system. So I come in every 3 years and I work with the city, and we just kind of look at how many users you have, and the policies to set up a new user and all of that to make sure that there's no one that could potentially be discriminated upon because of the federal funds that are going into it. Section 5, requirements prior to loan closing. Interim financing, we'll use that all the way through, and then we'll get a final payoff on that, so we can pay that off and turn ours into the permanent loan. 32, the vulnerability and emergency response plan, we already have that, so we don't need to do anything more there. 33 is other requirements. Letter A is system of awards management. Right now, the city is registered with the system of awards management. The abbreviation for that is SAMS. All the way through the project, the city needs to make sure that they stay registered with the SAMS program, because that's how, when we're going to disperse money and pay any bills, we make sure that the city's not debarred from receiving any federal funds, and then we do the same to all the contractors that we're paying. So all the way through the project, you just want to make sure that you keep the SAMS that you currently have up to date, which is very simple to do. Litigation and certified operator, nothing really there. It just talks about if it did go to litigation, what the process would be. The city has a certified operator for your system, so we have nothing there. 34 is talking about requirements during construction. Just like in the previous phases, there'll be a resident inspector on site. They're making sure that everything the contractor is supposed to be putting in the ground, he's actually putting in the ground, so they kind of oversee everything and are the go-between for everybody. 35 is a pre-construction meeting. We'll do a pre-construction conference with the contractor, the city, the engineer, and everybody prior to starting construction. That just lays out the process on how everything will work for payments, for change orders, and all that kind of stuff. 36 talks about inspections. I come out for the monthly construction meetings, and I just do random inspections on the site. There's not much that I do on the rural development side, but just kind of monitor what's going on and watch the progress of it. But the main inspections are done through the testing companies and the things like that. 37 talks about change orders. Anytime there's a change order in the project, once we start construction, that will also have to be reviewed by our state engineer and signed off on it to make sure that the price is accurate, that it's fair, that the city's not being overcharged, anything like that. 38, payment. This kind of talks about the payment process on how we pay the contractor when it gets to that point, same as we're doing in phase 1 and phase 2, and we'll go more in depth on that at the pre-construction meeting. Use of remaining funds, number 39, that's just talking about when the project's all said and done, if there's some remaining funds left, what are our options? Instead of sending grant dollars back, can we potentially use it for some piece of equipment that the city needs regarding the sewer system or the water system or things like that? 40, technical, managerial, and financial capacity. These are all things that I need to monitor on an ongoing basis. When I come out and do my inspections every 3 years, I'm just looking to make sure that the system is still self-sustainable, still have an operator, all of those basic things like that. 41 is requirements related to the expenditure of the funds. This one is more for your accountant. It just lists out what kind of audit they need to do and what kind of special tracking they need to do because of the federal funds that are coming into the project and the dollar amount and where the thresholds are with that. So that's all pretty standard. We're doing the same thing on your earlier phases. Payments and extra payments. At any point, you guys can make extra payments on your loan if you want to. There's no prepayment penalty. You can pay it down sooner. 43 is graduation. What that is every 2 years after the project's done, one of my jobs is when I review the audit is we look at the potential of graduation or paying off the loan or refinancing it out. The sooner you guys can pay off the federal loan, we can then take that money and help another city. So we want you to be able to pay off the loan or to refinance it out or things like that. So we do monitor, and at some point in the future I might come to you guys and say, hey, interest rates are dropping, you might want to look at refinancing this, or we got to a point now where you have enough funds that you should look at just paying it off. 44 is security and operation inspections. That is once the project's done, that's where I come out every 3 years and do my inspections that we're required to do. We do our compliance reviews at the same time. 45 is the annual financial reporting and audit requirements. Again, that's for the auditor telling them what we need to do. From the city standpoint, what you're going to be doing is each December when you pass a budget, I will get a copy of the budget, and then each July when you get an audit, I'll get a copy of the audit. On the budget, what I'm looking for is basically the city needs to make sure you're budgeting enough revenue to cover the expenses. So we want each system, the water system, the sewer system, and the storm system, to each be standalone systems. So the revenue you generate in the water is enough to cover all the expense. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see the city in a spot where you have to be pulling money from other accounts and doing other things. The way the budget is laid out is if you generate that much revenue, based on the estimates, you should be able to cover all your expenses and be able to put the money aside in the reserves that you're required to. On the audit, then when I get the audit, I'm just looking, okay, how is the city doing? Were you able to meet that, or are you not? Do we need to talk about raising rates or lowering expenses, or different options there? Quarterly reports for the first 2 years, I get a quarterly report just showing what's going on with the water and the sewer accounts. 46 is the annual budget and projected cash flow. We had just talked about that. That's the budget at the end of the year that I'll get for the upcoming year. 47 is that same vulnerability assessment or emergency response plan. That should be updated every 3 to 6 years, so when I come out for my inspections, we'll talk about that in the future at some point. 48 is insurances. Just need to make sure that the insurances that are listed on here, that the city keeps those and maintains those at all time when there's a loan. 49 talks about the statutory and the national policy requirements. These are all those different Civil Rights Act that the city has to follow, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA Act. So these are all things that when I do that compliance review that we're monitoring. We have been monitoring them for the last couple of years. There's no issues at this point, so should be nothing that the city needs to change that I know of at this point, but we continue to always monitor that as we go forward and as things change. So if you want to read through all the different ones, you can, but I usually don't go through them all. Number 50, the last one, is the compliance reviews. We've already talked about that. That's where I come out every 3 years and kind of go through those. So that is a real quick rundown of the letter of conditions. I know there's a whole bunch of information in there. So do you guys have any questions about all the different stuff on the letter we went through? One thing that I want to make sure I point out back on, was it the repayment terms? Let's go to that one once quick. If you look at number 4, the repayments. So here again, it lists out the total annual payment and it lists out how much for each of the individual systems. I don't know offhand if the city is currently charging anything for the storm, but the storm is a standalone item. You've got your water account and the payment for the water, the sewer and the payment for the sewer, but the storm also has its own payment. So you might want to start considering that. If you're not having something set up on the storm, how are you going to cover that portion of it? Because every city usually has the water and the sewer, but I don't recall if you guys have a storm fee set up. Does anybody know?
We put the storm fee on the last utility increase, didn't we?
As a, as an added tax item.
Yep.
Okay, so you have started addressing it. Perfect. Just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that and you don't forget about that one. So, otherwise, if you have no other questions on the letter of condition, then I'll kind of go through the budget with you real quick. I don't have copies to pass out. It just kind of lists out the expenses that the engineer's estimating on that. So. So on this one, I'll kind of explain them to you guys, and then I'll make a copy so Chris has a copy of it for your guys' records, because this is kind of the key. You know, if you follow this budget and you generate the revenue that we're estimating on here, theoretically, based on the engineer's estimates, it should be able to cash flow the systems. So a very quick and easy way to do it is, if you look at your water revenue, look at what you earned last year in the water revenue, and then look at the budget, how much your water revenue should be in the year 2020, you know on a real basic estimate how short you are. And then from there, you can divide it up and see what it does to your rates. So when we put this together, the government will never dictate to the city how you generate your revenue or how you structure it. That's always up to you. What we do is we need a method that we can compare city to city on an even basis. So that's how we use our formula to generate this revenue, is it's the same formula that we use for every city to compare them on an even basis. So now you know what the revenue should be in the system. How you guys choose to get there, that's for you guys to decide. So, and there's a lot of different resources out there. You know, you can pay a company to come in and help you do rate studies. You can take advantage of Minnesota Rural Water. They can come in and help you kind of do rate studies. It's, you know, it's completely up to you guys. So I'll start with the water one. The revenue that the water system should generate on a per year basis is $696,732. From that, what we're doing is we're first taking off your O&M, your operating to run the system. So the estimated operating cost of the system, and this is all based on when we're done with everything. This is not just based on this first half, this is based on the completion of the full Phase 3 project. So the estimated cost to run the system, once it's completed, is $319,262. The next thing we look at taking off there is the estimate for the short-lived assets. That's $19,368. That again is the money that's put aside for future repairs. What that leaves us with is an operating income of $358,102. The next thing we do is take off your existing debts. So all the debts that you have against the water system on previous debts, your annual payment on that right now is about $224,334. So that then comes off. What's left over is the payment on this new loan. This loan, for the water side, the payment is about $133,766. And at that point, you're left with a couple dollars left over. This is kind of a break-even budget. So, again, the key number is the revenue, $696,732. How you get to that is up to you guys, but that's the key on where you want to be on the water. So any questions about the water budget or how these numbers? Part of it gives you, I just gave you totals for the operating cost and for the short-lived assets. The copy I'll give to the city, it breaks down each of them individually. So you can go right through what's estimated on the O&M, you can go through the short-lived assets and all of that, compare it to your current one, and do whatever you want with it, but it gives you a lot more information to look at if you want. So, on the sewer system, the other big one, the operating revenue that the sewer system should generate is $689,985. So again, the first thing we take off there is what does it cost to operate the system for the year? The estimate for the operating of the new complete system is $134,237. Next comes off the short-lived assets for future repairs. That's $4,485 or $86. The next one is a PFA WIF grant reserve. So when you look back at the funding package, there's $3.4 million coming in from the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota has a requirement that you put aside reserve dollars based on the average water flow that's going into your sewer system. So we use the average flow from the engineer, we back into it, and it's 50 cents per 1,000 gallons that are treated, and that gives us a number for an annual reserve. So the annual reserve that has to be set aside for the state money is $54,750. So that is also accounted for in this budget to make sure that you put that money aside before we make any loan payments. So each year, that is also a requirement from the state side, is that that money is put aside into a reserve account, and that money builds up until you get to a point where you can pay off the loan or you have it in case you need it, but that is the state requirement. So any questions on that part? Okay. So after we take off the operating, the short-lived assets, and the reserves, that leaves you left over with $193,473 for your operating expense. Then again, we take off previous debts. On the sewer system, when we look at all your previous debts that are out there, previous debts being anything prior to rural development, anything related to Phase 1 and Phase 2, the previous debt amount is $379,481. So we take that off what's left of the money, and that leaves you with $117,030 to make your final payment. So, sewer. Last one is the storm. Again, the revenue based on the storm is $175,550. So on the storm system now, this looks at it a little bit differently than the water and the sewer. The water and the sewer is based on the average usage per household, and then we take your commercial users and say, okay, this one business, how many residential users would this one business be if it was residential? That gives us a number that we can come up with revenue. Storm is different. Because storm is not measured by water usage, storm is measured on a per connection basis. So on a per connection, when I take your residential and your commercial users, you have 1,002 total users. So if you divide that 1,002 total users by the $175,550 a year, it's about $14.60 per month is what it'll cost each account on a very straight divided method for the storm system. So that's a little bit different than the other ones. Any questions on that or how that was figured out? Okay. And then when it comes for expenses on that, operating and maintenance expense, we don't have anything for operating and maintenance. Those are all covered under water and sewer. Short-lived assets is $171 a year, very, very minimal. You know, and whether you put that aside or you add that 171 to the water, I don't think it really matters because it's such a small amount. But then that leaves us with an operating income of $175,379. The previous debts on the storm system right now are $98,517, which leaves you with the leftover money to equal the last payment, or the new payment is $76,850. So I just rattled off a whole bunch of numbers to you. Any questions on that side of it? Okay. So going forward, what I need to do tonight is the budgets we went through, I need the signature from the mayor and the administrator on the budgets, just saying that we talked about these. The letter of conditions, I have a letter that is an intent to meet the conditions, just saying that you guys went through the whole letter of conditions with me, you were able to ask any questions, and at this point you intend to meet the conditions of the funding package. It is not obligating you to anything, it's just saying that, yes, we went through it and you're agreeable to everything. What'll happen then going forward is, because we have that Friday deadline, I will put the obligation form together and send that over to Chris. And once we get the go-ahead from the national office, then the mayor and the administrator signs the obligation form. That form is what allows us to take all this money from the national office and put it aside for the city of Tracy. So that is the key part, because that's when we know we have the money. Even at that point, you're still not obligating yourself to anything. That's just pulling the money aside. The final step will be a loan resolution, which will happen a month or two down the road after we get the money. That's where you as a council will make a motion to move forward with the funding package, vote on it, and then it's a resolution. And that's when you're saying, yep, we're moving forward with phase 3 of the project. So that's kind of the rough layout of what we're doing here tonight, the signatures that I need. The obligation form that the mayor will sign when we're ready for that, that does not have to be at a council meeting. It's up to you guys if you guys are fine with the mayor and the administrator signing that. So it's up to you. Whether you do it at another special meeting this week or you guys are fine with them signing it, that's your call. So I'll give you the forms here, Pam. So here's all 3 of the budget forms. Your signature and date goes on the bottom.
So we should make a motion that we're fine with the mayor and the administrator?
I don't even have to have a motion. That's up to you guys. If you guys want to do that, to have it in the records that way, it's completely up to you, but it's not a requirement of me if you want to.
Takes a minute.
I was gonna say, I'll make the motion that we allow the mayor and the administrator to sign the obligation come Friday.
I'll second.
First and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then Chris, you need to sign right time and date. You're just attesting that you saw her sign those. This one is just the letter of the intent. It's just saying that you're intending to meet it on this date. You do a 1-year date on here. You just sign below there.
Below?
Anywhere. Aye.
Is there anything else after these that I have to sign?
Nothing tonight, just the
I know, but
obligation
like
forms and going
later this
forward.
week?
the obligation form. The one that they made the motion to,
Okay,
yep.
Are you not going to be present Friday?
no.
Hopefully we have it before Friday. They're reviewing the file right now, so I'm hoping to get it tomorrow
Get
or
it.
Wednesday.
Oh, good, because Emma's gone like 4 o'clock Wednesday morning.
You're leaving at when?
4 o'clock Wednesday morning.
And where you
Morning.
going?
Ohio.
Ohio.
Twins convention.
4 o'clock Wednesday morning, so that gives us tomorrow. Okay.
Pro
Is
tem
there-
can
Or
sign
I
it.
was going to say,
Yeah.
can the mayor pro tem?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's an issue with that being the mayor's out of town, so you might want to make a
Amend my
motion that if you're
motion.
not gone, or if you are gone, someone else can.
I'll amend my motion, my motion,
Yep.
that if the mayor is out of town, that the mayor pro tem is allowed to sign in her absence.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
First and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks.
You better be in town.
I'll be gone in the morning when I'm back.
So while I'm here, is there any other questions that you guys have on any of the phases or any parts of the project, or just anything at this point?
These budget numbers you gave us for the water, sewer, the target for the annual,
Mm-hmm.
does that take us completely through the entire project or
Yep.
just through the first half of phase 3?
Nope, it's through the entire project, because what we do is when we're looking at it, we first start with the entire project. So when I was going through the debt portion with you guys, the remaining part that's not in here yet is factored in there as well. Exactly. So this is through completion of everything.
So to make these revenue dates, to make this all work, do we have a timeline where we have to have our utilities to make that $670,000 or $690,000 a year on the water? We do it next year, but we need it done.
Yeah, the way I underwrote it was our first full year would be 2020. So, 2022, I'm sorry, 2022. But even that's a conservative estimate, because again, this is based on the full project. 2022 will get us through the first half of it. So, I mean, ideally, if you can be at this point, you're going to be ahead of the game and generate some extra revenue. If you're not quite at this point, it's probably going to offset itself out, because this is factoring in for the later debt in the future. So
So we got a little room to work.
yes, you got a little wiggle room, and it's very hard to tell you exactly when, but you're thinking about it exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So if you guys don't have any other questions, that's all I have for tonight, and then I'll be in touch with Chris tomorrow. So
Total phase 3 is how much?
39.5 with ineligibles, if I recall right. Isn't that close, Chris?
Yeah, 39.5 is what I wrote down.
Yep. So, well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do a special meeting. I know time crunch is always a little bit tough, but that's kind of how the government goes, it's hurry up and wait, and then it's go, go, go. So I appreciate, setting the meeting and taking the time tonight. And if you have any questions, as always, call me, email me, and we can go through whatever. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Should be noted that he had to put in a lot of work over the weekend to get this all done in time, so thank you for that.
Did you want to talk?
Just, I think the 8 remaining services on phase 1 was on the agenda.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe. Jeff and I talked a little bit, and at some point, we're just gonna need to close out the contract with Dunick. We can't leave them on the hook forever waiting for these. So we're thinking by the next, which would be the August 14th meeting, if those 8 aren't done by then, which, I don't think anyone really anticipates that will happen, then we'll probably have a change order that will remove it from Dunick's contract and give them an extension to get the rest, because technically right now their completion date was June 30th, but they've been waiting
Yep.
to see what happened with these services. So just to clean up the project timeline. And then one idea I had sent Shane and Chris today, I thought of late last week, was we could potentially, because the issue, as you recall, is the plumbers getting back to property owners. As we understand it, it's not the property owners not trying to get something done, is with this phase, the first part of phase 3A, the one that's gonna go next year for construction. Those 8 remaining services include that in the construction contract. The property owners, we'd have to think through some of the details or work through them, but basically the property owners would have to petition for that improvement, grant some sort of temporary easement to allow the city's contractor to come in and do it. We have to figure out what a reasonable amount for the assessment is, because obviously a property owner isn't going to petition for an unknown cost. And then that way the city will have leverage, because it'll be part of their construction contract, and the contractor will be signing a contract with the city that, yes, this is part of our scope of work. So that's one option we could explore.
Ideally-
Obviously, that puts it off to 2019.
I
though.
would say ideally you want it done before they put that second lift on.
Yes, yes.
So my question is, have we personally contacted those 8 residents and found out where they're at? And I mean, we had face-to-face, not letters, not,
I haven't personally. I know we've sent some things, and we've talked,
I've
when I say
talked-
we, I mean city and
I've talked to almost every one of them on the phone. There's a few that I haven't, but all of them are saying the same thing. Their plumber isn't getting it done. I
Are we
have
down to one contractor that's not getting them done, or is it?
pretty much, I think there's one plumber that has one left and the other one has the rest of them. So,
well then, what leverage do we have with that one that's sitting there on 7 of them that we could get done? I mean, it's not anything that's gonna take them a month to do these 8, you know.
You
a
can do
month
one a
apiece.
day.
Yeah, so it's,
And we talked about, this was before the flood, obviously, so that kind of changed both plumbers and I think some residents' priorities of either cleaning their basements or helping other people in town, but opening it up to out-of-town
Right.
contractors. And I believe one of the property owners didn't contact someone from Marshall, and they said they were 6 to 8 weeks out.
yeah,
Yeah.
we missed that boat.
Yeah.
But is there any leverage that we have that we can use on the one that's tying up those 7 properties, basically?
Not really,
Yeah.
because we didn't contract them.
Right.
But they're interfering with, that is interfering with our project, that's what I'm saying. It would getting that plumber in and sit down and talking to him, does anybody other than me think that might help?
I have talked to them in the past, probably a couple months ago when we were talking about it last time. And it's always an excuse of a breakdown, or it's too wet, or not enough help, can't work on Fridays.
Does it have to be that contractor?
No, they can pick whoever they want.
Just because the homeowners not contacted?
We can't pick on their behalf, we can't
No,
force
but-
them on anything. But we did talk about maybe reaching out of state, or not out of state, out further in the state, out of town, and potentially looking for someone that'd be willing to come and knock them all out. Just dig the holes, get them done, and do that. And then, but we would have to get the residents to agree to that. And then,
And the residents wouldn't agree to having a different plumber in town, or they just don't?
the object is to keep the business local, but when it's hindering the second lift, it's.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is like the residents, can we talk to them about changing plumbers? You know, instead of
I would
sticking
think
with
if we
the-
would go to them and say, would you be willing to go with an out-of-town plumber? But they're gonna wanna know
Or a
what the
different one in
price
town.
is.
Right.
So it's
I mean,
not like,
nobody's gonna say, yeah, I'll go with an out-of-town
Yeah,
plumber, and then
exactly.
you're paying twice and you're not keeping it local.
but aren't they keeping it local if they choose a different plumber in Tracy? Just not that one that's holding up the whole show?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
so if there's one left that only has one plumber that has one service left.
Yeah, and the biggest complaint that I have is the digging part of it. You know, the plumbers are happy with laying the pipe in there, it's getting the resources.
Someone to excavate.
to excavate, and a lot of them are 1- and 2-man shows, and they
We-
just have too many service contracts with other people that they can't break away.
And plumbing a nice new unfinished basement is a lot easier than trying to dig up someone's yard and fit between a garage and a shed, and I mean, it's not as desirable of work. We did reach out to Dunick to see if there was a way to coordinate, while they're in town to, they'll have to bring their excavation equipment back in to make the final disconnections of the old main that's connected to the new main that was just put in, and a couple of repairs that were on their punch list. We reached out to see if there was any interest in coordinating. They do the excavation, plumber jumps down in the trench, does the hookup, and they backfill, and they basically said they didn't have time and it wouldn't have been
Is it gonna be a
profitable.
much smaller backhoe to dig their trenches versus what they have?
Yeah, the other thing would probably be smaller equipment too.
Small, mini, or a little bit bigger.
Right.
Some of them, it's a narrow area and it's very deep, so it's kind of a tough area. But
Tight quarters.
Should we sit down and try and find somebody to come in and dig? Is that our biggest problem?
we can do that, and we can just, I guess, let homeowners know that, hey, here's a list of who would be available to finish it up. I mean, that's really all we can do. We can't say, hey, you have to hire this person, but
No, but if we found someone that said they're tired of waiting too. If we
Yeah.
found somebody that said they'll come to town, knock out all 7 of them, somebody, a plumber with a mini hoe that could come in and do that, maybe we should start calling around.
Yep.
Reaching a little bit further out.
Can't hurt anything.
because it's got to be costing us interest on our temp bond to have it.
Yeah. There was, we had a discussion with the city attorney about other alternatives too, but most of them seem to be, I guess I don't want to say too much in an open meeting, but they seem to be more punitive to the property owner, if they were even a feasible option.
Yeah.
When it's not the as far as we understand, it's not the property owners dragging their.
Well, that's why I asked the question, if we had sat down face to face with them so they understand that we're trying to help them, number one, and number two, why we need it done so we can get this project completed.
Well, and you've talked to both plumbers, and they have said they just they haven't either
The
had
one-
the time or
The one that's actually done most of them, he might be willing. I can talk to him. He's got one more left on his list that people have called him on. I don't know if he'd take on more or if he's,
Well, I think we contact both local plumbers and tell them, we need to get this done. We'd like to keep it local, but if you can't meet our needs, we're going to have to look at some options outside of the town. And then see if there is somebody from outside that will come in and hammer them all out, if we can get a price. And then we go to the property owners and say, okay, we have found someone else that's willing to come and do it for this dollar amount. And then they still have to agree or disagree to do it. I think we want to give our local ones one last chance, that if you can't do it, we want to keep local, but we have to move forward on this project.
And if any of them thinks it's a funding thing, they need to be made aware that they can petition to have it put on their taxes.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
most of them that are left, I've talked to him on that. And
Yeah, and the last letter that went out to plumbers reminded them that, it's basically guaranteed payment, because if they go
Yep.
this assessment route from the city, and they don't have to worry about chasing down if that is even one of their concerns. I'm sure it helps mitigate.
So does that give you guys direction?
Yeah, we'll take care of it from there.
Yeah.
We may have to outsource, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
We won't if we don't have to, but if we have to, we will work to get it done in a timely fashion, and if it takes bringing somebody from Bemidji down here to do the work, then that's what we'll do. There's somebody out there that'll dig, and somebody that'll couple some pipe.
Yeah.
We'll find them.
Would be very good news to come back to the meeting on the 13th and find out it's all done, but.
Winter's coming.
Well, we don't have a magic wand.
No.
We just-
But it'd be
We'll see
very
what we
good
can
news,
do.
that's all. It'd be an early
A
Christmas.
plan with some dates.
Yeah, I'm gonna plan, we'll do a plan.
That's all I had, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Do we have fire truck information?
A little bit. I thought maybe I guess I can kind of speak for it.
Was I
So-
supposed to text him, huh?
Yeah, I'll talk for a little bit if you can hear your truck rolling up. So we did, Shane and I went and talked with FEMA on Wednesday. There was kind of an information gathering, but it was for us as well. And one of the things that we talked to them about was the potential for some fire truck changes. The fact that some of our trucks are gonna be totaled. We did talk to them. Now, there's no guarantee or anything, but we did mention about the gap financing or the coverage of the gap. So if we get, and I'm just gonna spitball some numbers here, but if we have a $100,000 truck and we only get 15,000 from the insurance, there is the possibility of some funding coverage depending on the declaration, which has yet to come, for FEMA to cover some of that. So that was something that we wanted to explore before. The trucks that have to be totaled, they just have to be totaled. They have to be removed out of the system. The insurance simply will not fix them. And I think that, well, I know that we agreed, or the council agreed last time to phase that out and replace those vehicles as need be, so. I believe he's working now on getting a chassis ordered so that the chassis can then go to the manufacturer. The manufacturer will build the truck. There's a short supply of chassis, so now we've got some local reps that he's been talking to out searching for a chassis to get one to the manufacturer as soon as possible. I don't know that he's, Shane, do you have anything more on that, or?
Well, I know.
I think that's about where we're at. Questions on anything else on that?
At least it's a little positive.
Yeah, it's just, it
Hopeful
takes,
anyway.
takes a little bit of time, so. They did bring a truck for us to look at to see potentially what was ordered in the combination truck deal, and it was a very smart move to do that. We're basically covering two trucks with one, and it's a nice truck. It would work well.
Okay, then we'll move on to the liquor store discussion.
So the liquor store committee met at 5 o'clock today, and they talked about the RFP proposal from, for lack of better words, Red Rooster Development from the TDC they were representing. The recommendations from the liquor committee was to put in the RFP that the purchaser would have to purchase the inventory on hand at the date of purchase for 100% of the invoice price, meaning what the city had into it. And there are some, Teagues probably can jump in on that a little more, but I think there are some laws that actually fall into effect where we can't take less than what we paid for it.
Yeah, and that'd be one we just have to look at, but it'd be like, all of a sudden I'd go, hey, I'm gonna be selling my store pretty soon, well, why don't you buy a couple hundred cases and then we'll sell it to you at 85% of cost. So I think, and that, like I said, would be one we'd have to check out, that it has to be for like an invoiced price.
There's a lot of parameters when it comes to alcohol sales, and that was one that I didn't research, but I definitely will look into it more, but
I think
it's
that's
also
a good
what we
call.
paid for it too. The second one was the January 1st purchase takeover date. Later on, it talks about that they could operate in that, number 5 actually talks about that they could operate in that facility until they could move into a different facility, depending on who it was. Going back to 3, one of 2 options that benefit the city. Either new construction within city limits, or to refurbish an existing location or current vacant building in Tracy city limits. The object, and that would be that it would create some tax revenue for the city. So liquor stores make money. You want it to benefit the city in some way, shape, or form moving on. Number 4 was carryover of current staff. And number 5 was, again, recapping the allowed to operate in the current location until 2020. That'd be something that the council could extend later if they wanted to, but you just want to set a date and say, you can operate in here for this time. However you want to proceed with a rent, an annual lease, whatever you'd want to put in for something like that. So those were the recommendations from the liquor committee.
far
So
as
what
towards
you're
the
saying
RFP.
then is that an existing establishment that would like to put in off sale is not allowed to?
Correct.
They would have to refurbish another building or build a new building.
Or the city, we would not be gaining anything in taxable income or anything, and we would be giving up the potential income of the liquor store. If they just put it in their existing business right now, there would be no benefit for the city.
Aren't she benefiting if you're charging them, each one of them for a off-sale license?
So the license, the max you can charge is $240, and if they participate in, and I don't remember exactly, but if they participate in certain things, 21 and under, a heavy ID check, things like that, you actually have to give them a $100 discount on the license.
Really?
So it ends up being a $140 license.
What do they charge for an on-sale?
On sale's a different, whole different
Well, I know it is, but I
parameters.
was just wondering what they charge for an on-sale.
A lot more.
I
was
didn't
gonna say, I
research that,
thought
but
it was a lot
it is, yep, it's
Oh
a
my-
lot different.
Wow.
So yeah, we don't make anything
Okay.
on an off-sale license if we give up the municipal.
So the goal of the committee with number 3 was to create some tax income. So I guess that was the liquor store committee's recommendations to the council, and then the council should then dictate back how you would like to move forward with a RFP, if you would like to, if you would like to set the parameters on it.
And Jerry and I were at the meeting, I mean, so we talked, and this is what we came up with. And then we all talked about essentially a 60-day window for doing the RFP. So they'd have to like, September 30th to do the RFP, and then we'd review them, reject them if we don't like any of them, approve one if we like one, and go from there.
So you're not limiting how many, it's just if they have a new building or refurbish a building?
Nope. Sorry, do you want?
You go ahead.
So there's Minnesota statute 340A.413. Under subdivision 5, it talks about off-sale license. No off-sale intoxicating liquor license may be issued in any city except as provisions of this, in this section, in excess of the following limits. In cities of first class, no more than one off-sale license for 5,000 population. And 2, which covers us, in other cities the limit shall be determined by the governing body of the city. It goes further in another version, touches on the same thing. 1 license per 5,000 is the guidelines for cities above the size of Tracy. The city the size of Tracy, it's up to the guidance of the governing body, which would be the city council here.
So in going by the guidelines, we would have one liquor store.
But we could consider having to.
We could consider having 2, but the state says, each city your size 1. But there are exceptions made everywhere.
Do you want to check on anything with the public?
Does anybody from the public want to talk about the liquor store?
Well, I'd make a motion that you use this as a guideline in setting up the RFP with the RFP due dates no later than September 30th. And then by October 15th, we have reviewed and make a recommendation to accept, decline, negotiate with one person on something specific.
We have a
second it.
motion. First and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Would you like me to create the RFP present it to you at the next meeting. And then if it's approved, we could distribute it as long as Matt can get it done in that timeline. I think with the complications of liquor, that he definitely should be involved in that.
Yep.
I'll ask him. I tried to get a phone call into him beforehand, but I missed him today.
So if we don't have the RFP ready till, or approved till August 13th, 60 days from that, because our meeting in October is the 8th, we'd be at 30 days. So we would need to push it back. It'd be
Well, we
almost the
could-
end of,
You could still set it for September 30th.
That's
You
still
can set it-
45 days.
That's plenty of time.
If somebody's interested, you're gonna have 45 days to figure out your costs, your insurance, your financing for it. I would think that would fall into anybody who's serious about that, fall into their guidelines.
And that's something that you could make the decision of next council meeting. When yeah. Okay.
Okay, fly-in insurance.
So I actually got a call from our insurance. We're covered on fly-ins. Apparently they watched the show and changed their mind. So either way, we are covered on fly-ins, not
Air shows.
air shows. And I think Mr. Peterson put that out, and you were right. So thank you. And yeah, I am still going to check into the league's side of it and find out why we have split insurance. I don't know as of now why, but the league is actually digging into it for me as well, so I'll get back to you with that reasoning in the future. But for now, we are covered and it's safe to conduct it. Do you want to, fire chief's here, do you want to?
Did you want to add anything, Dale, about the fire trucks from, you don't know what Chris said, but.
I just explained that, that there is a potential, and I strongly urge potential, for some FEMA gap stuff if, depending on the declaration level, and that you were looking at chassis right now and trying to get a chassis, so you may want to expand on that, or?
I think that pretty much covers it. We have reached out. We are currently looking for 2 different chassis. They are trying to find one. The one manufacturer said if we could find a chassis here by the end of August, or by actually the middle of August, that they would bump us up and start manufacturing that truck by the end of August. So we'd probably be looking at close to February we'd have it, instead of a year and a half out. If they can't find a chassis, then it's going to be slightly different. We may have to switch to one of the other trucks to get it, start with that truck to get it replaced. Because we definitely want to take this gap. I mean, otherwise we're waiting a year and a half, at least a year and a half, so. Works in progress. Nothing seems to happen overnight, and that's not really how I like it, but.
Nothing good ever happens fast.
I know, but patience is a virtue. That's what my mother always told me, and I still haven't learned it.
Keep it up.
Yeah, we're fighting the fight. Some of the damaged equipment is starting to show up. All the damage assessment estimates and stuff have all been turned in. So as far as everything goes with the insurance company, I think we're waiting on a couple things, but we're moving onward and upward. Actually, if the guys get done doing the door-to-door thing tonight early enough, we're going to take time to wash the trucks we have that are still running, because everything's still filthy from July 3rd. Try to wash the trucks and wash out the floor of the fire hall and make things presentable again.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to know anything? Do you have anything for TDC at all, for the liquor store?
Don't have anything.
Okay.
Okay, if anybody else doesn't have anything else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second?
First and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.